What about this legislation, reducing accidents in locomotives, or the Rail Act? I understand it's got bipartisan support. I would imagine at this juncture you've kind of taken a look into it. Does it have some teeth? Is it going to make some changes here? What's your take?
It has a lot of good pieces to it, including on rail car inspections. It includes language on crew size, so requiring two crew members on every single freight train, which is, as you know, is a long overdue piece of legislation and one that's being regulated right now by the Biden administration. It does a lot that I think it's a really good starting point for how we can improve and reform the industry. Unfortunately, when the House bill, the companion legislation, if you will, was introduced, they had the rail industry had successfully lobbied the Republican leaders to strip out the crew size regulation. So they're already getting to work to try to weaken this thing and try to take as many teeth out of it as they can.
What about the people? I just mentioned that story about the one woman who testified last week. I mean, they can't even sell their homes right now. The place is a disaster. Now, would Norfolk Southern buy up the properties? I mean, who's going to handle that? Or is that going to be a government thing? Or is it too premature right now to figure that one out?
I think it's premature to figure that out. I know that Norfolk Southern has assumed the full cost of cleanup. I know they've offered to pay for expenses for families that have that feel like they need to temporarily relocate for a bit here. And honestly, we don't know what the long-term impacts truly are from the vinyl chloride spill and the burning off of the chemicals that happened. So I really do hope that both Norfolk Southern realizes that they are culpable here and they need to make sure this community is whole. And I also hope that the federal government is able to hold them accountable here. Because again, I'm not sure what, we're a little bit of a gray area here about, the long-term impacts of a chemical spill, stuff like this.
Sure. Well, we do know this. Norfolk Southern, there's, half a dozen rail companies right now. There's been a lot of consolidation. In fact, I see there was more consolidation since you and I last talked. There was a merger. This is primarily on the West Coast, Canadian Pacific, and Kansas City Southern. They have merged, and we've seen a lot of workers shed. How do you run, a rail system with so few workers? Are they picking up on hiring at all on any of this?
They're trying. And look, it's about 30% of the entire freight rail workforce across the Class 1 railroads that was laid off over the last 10 years. And Norfolk Southern was the worst offender of that. They were upwards of 40% of their workforce was laid off. But the problem that the railroads are going to face in terms of really hiring up, and I think they've admitted they need to hire more people, is that they're treating the incumbent workforce pretty terribly right now. And whether it be things like sick days, which fortunately each of the railroads are starting to negotiate directly with the unions to provide paid sick leave for their workers, and that's a really good development. But let's be honest, that wouldn't have happened without a massive outcry from workers and from unions to try to force this issue. But whether it be attendance policies, whether it be, work schedules, all of these things are contributing to people not wanting to stay in the industry. So until they start treating their workers with more dignity and respect, I don't know how they're going to be able to recruit and, more importantly, retain the workers they need to make sure stuff like this doesn't happen in the future.
That merger that I referenced between Canadian Pacific and Kansas City Southern, were you surprised by that, especially at this time when we're kind of dissecting this industry? That's been a long time in the works. I'm not really, and those are two of the smaller Class 1. So we didn't take a formal position on that merger. I think there were conditions that we wanted to see met. But, when you look at the majority of the U.S. freight network, are largely controlled by four large carriers, two on the West Coast, two on the East Coast. So, it's PNSF and Union Pacific on the West and CSX and Norfolk Southern east of the Mississippi.
So that's where you have like the bulk. Those are the big four carriers right there, and they have effective duopolies on either half of the United States. So it's that's where we see a lot of the problems, both in service, it's where we see a lot of the problems in safety, and certainly where we've seen the bulk of the job cuts over the last decade or so.
All right, let's switch gears here a little bit and talk about the Federal Aviation Administration. Apparently, there's nobody in charge. There's no administrator right now, and there is support for one individual. And you were telling me before we went on the air that he withdrew his candidacy.
Yeah.
What the heck is going on here, Greg?
Yeah, it's a real shame. Phil Washington was nominated by the Biden administration last year. He is eminently qualified. He has run major transit organizations. He currently runs the Denver airport. And the FAA is it's the largest, modal agency within the Department of Transportation. It is a massive organization. It is critically important to our country, and we need strong leadership in that role. And right now we have acting leadership, and we're looking at a number of things here, including the fact that we have the Boeing, the legislation that was passed after the Boeing accident that need to be implemented. And we need somebody in there that can run a major organization that can actually get this stuff done. And right now, it's sort of a drifting ship.
And he had the support of a lot of people, number of unions, former FAA leaders, the industry itself. I don't get it. So is this just like a Republican stalling technique because anything that Biden brings to the table, they reject? Is that kind of what's going on right now, in your opinion?
I got the impression they saw an opportunity to take a little, a pound of flesh here from the Biden administration by opposing him. There were people who criticized he didn't have, he wasn't a pilot, for example, or he wasn't in the aviation industry for very long, which I think is complete hogwash. What we need in that agency is somebody who understands how to take a look at a large organization, understand where the problems are, and understand how where there need to be changes to start getting it to run in a more effective way. And I believe that Phil was that person. I don't know who is going to be nominated next. I have trust in the administration to pick a qualified person, one that can do what Phil would have done. But we are now almost 2 years without a confirmed leader at the FAA, and I think that's a real problem.
Well, I have to agree with you. I mean, not having somebody in charge, the flying public here has got to be concerned because there's a lot of, I was reading about, there's a backlog of regulatory actions that need to be addressed. I can only assume that some of this is being addressed. There's somebody in charge, like a number two person that's kind of guiding it, but nobody calling the real big shots right now. Is that the picture that's being painted right now?
Well, there is, there's a Billy Nolan is the acting administrator. He was the deputy before. He is in charge. He's calling the shots, and I think he is a great public servant. But when you have that acting role, when you are not confirmed, it really limits your ability to do things really proactively and affirmatively, because you don't have that confirmation from the Senate. You don't have that stability in the role. So it really does mean that I've experienced this with a number of agencies. When you have people that are just acting, they do not feel empowered to fully take on the role and do what you need to do. And the FAA, let's be clear, the FAA is one that needs strong political leadership right now. We have an FAA reauthorization that needs to be reauthorized by the end of September. We have a number of provisions from the 2018 reauthorization that haven't been implemented, including things like secondary barriers for newly manufactured aircraft, which is, by the way, the last of the 9/11 recommendations that hasn't been implemented yet. We have, a number of reforms to the certification of new aircraft that need to be done that came out of the Boeing disasters. This is an agency that has a huge amount of work to do, and we need somebody that is empowered and fully allowed to do the job. Otherwise, we're going to go through another cycle here without having a real idea about what further legislation needs to be done, because we haven't finished the last one yet.